And just like that, the storm door opens. I am Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, February 10th. Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype. If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. If you have a comment or question, write it up down below. We'd be happy to reply. And if you'd like to make a small contribution to the cause, you may hit the super thanks button down below, the heart with a $sign in it. With that, I'd like to thank the folks that donated last week. Tim Caston, Our Predicament, Bob McDavitt, and Evolution Moto. Three of these folks are long-time contributors, and one of them is a new contributor the whole way from New Zealand. We welcome everyone. Thank you so much. Now, let's get to work. And as you can probably tell, I'm not sounding so good this evening. Got a little cold, trying to struggle through it, but the show must go on. We're going to start by looking at significant wave heights for the entire planet. Starting in the North Pacific, which is the star of the show this evening, a broad gale is developing just west of the dateline with 38-foot seas. Oh, no, this is over the entire planet, right? Okay, so these, just for your information, 38.5-foot seas is the highest seas over this entire domain, and here are the coordinates for where that is. So somewhere down here in the southern hemisphere. All right, but there are 32-foot seas here in the North Pacific, aimed well at Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast and covering a broad area. In the South Pacific, things are pretty quiet. In the North Atlantic, there is a gale with 22-foot seas south of Greenland, not doing a whole lot, but the forecast suggests maybe better things to come. South Atlantic has a gale with about 28-foot seas targeting South Africa, potentially generating some swell. The Indian Ocean, a pair of tropical systems, one of them is going to get pretty interesting. And another system here with 23-foot seas south of Madagascar. So all in all, given the time of year, a pretty productive pattern looks to be in control. And just some background information. So, of course, I'd go away for a day or two, and then there's a server upgrade on one of my servers, and it crashes everything, and none of the models, the buoys, anything refreshed for about 2.5, maybe 3 days. But all is up and working well now. It was an easy fix, and that's a good thing. All right, we're going to start by looking at current conditions. We're going to look at the buoys, starting up in the Pacific Northwest. The Grays Harbor Buoy, Washington, buoy number 036. This is off the Columbia River there. We're looking at all the energy that's hitting this buoy all the way up from 33.3 second period, really long period energy, which there is none. We see a little bump of energy here down at 14.3 seconds. We see another little bump here in the 7-second range. And this graph goes the whole way down to 5-second period. That would be really unrideable chop. But you see the 7-second bump and the 14-second period bump. Then we go and we pick up the energy on either sides of these peaks to calculate pure swell height. Primary swell, 2.4 feet at 13.9 seconds from 267 degrees, theoretically making surf 3.3 feet. That'd be like at a beach break sort of thing. If you have a good reef with swell enhancing bathymetry, you can get up to maybe twice that size. And then the secondary swell, the wind swell, 3.5 feet at 6.7 seconds, again from the northwest, theoretically making bump in the 2.3 foot range. The chop height, this is all the energy between 2 and 5 seconds, just gives you kind of an idea of how junky the swell is, how warbled. 1.3 feet, so theoretically, not too bad. Then we go down to Northern California, the Point Reyes buoy there, off of course, Point Reyes, just north of the Golden Gate Bridge. Same sort of profile. There's the longer period swell at 15 seconds or so, and then a larger share of wind swell in the 9-second period range. Primary swell, 6.8 feet at 8.8 seconds from 315 degrees, making surf theoretically 6.1 feet. Don't think it was that big. It was maybe head high in the biggest sets. And then that secondary swell, 2.4 feet at 14.1 seconds from the west, 282 degrees, making swell or surf heights in the 3.4 foot range. And the chop height, 2 feet. That was in the afternoon. It seemed a little bit less lumpy than that looking at it this morning. Then we go down to the Point Loma South buoy. That would be off of San Diego buoy number 191. Same sort of profile, a little bit of energy at 16 seconds, a little bit of energy at 14 seconds, a little bit of energy at 8 or 9 seconds. Let's see how well the algorithm does here. Primary swell 3.1 feet at 8.4 seconds from 283 degrees. That's about 2.5 feet. And that secondary swell 1.8 feet at 14.7 seconds from 219 degrees. Yes, southern hemi swell, the last little bit of it. And then there is, you don't see it here, but there is some little minimal northwest swell also creeping in. And of course, chop height 1.4 feet. I mean, well protected by the Channel Islands. Wouldn't expect anything too junky. Then finally, we head over to the north shore of Oahu using the Waimea Bay buoy number 106. And it is all in the longer period range here, 13.3 seconds, you see that. Primary swell, 4.5 feet at 12.7 seconds from 319 degrees, theoretically making surf 5.8 feet. Yeah, it was 1 or 2 feet overhead, as best I could tell. And then secondary swell, 2.6 feet at 9.3 seconds from the west, adding a little bit of bump in the I'll say waist high range. So let's review what's been going on for the past week. We're going to look at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean. So last week when we did the video Sunday, there was some sort of gale there, like north of Hawaii, producing 25-foot seas that eventually produced some north swell that hit the islands. But after that, it tried to regroup but faded. Then we got the first of 3 gales that developed on the dateline. On Wednesday, this first gale, actually, let's take it back to right about here. 34.5-foot seas. This was on Tuesday night about 10 o'clock. That'd be the 4th of February. That pushed over the dateline, faded pretty quick. But another one developed right behind that on Thursday with, I think it got, there we go, 29-foot seas on Thursday night, the 6th of February, into Friday morning. And then you see yet another here off of Japan on Thursday night into Friday with 33-foot seas. Did it get bigger? 32 feet, 29 feet, and fading out. So that third one right there, that swell is hitting Hawaii as we speak here on Sunday. Nothing huge, but rideable. The first of the 3 is bound in for California, or already has hit. Actually, I'm sorry, it's already hit. You saw it on the buoys at 15-second period interval. All right, now let's move on. As we got into Saturday and into Sunday, the 9th of February, a broader gale started developing off Japan, the datelines right about here. So west of the dateline, building with 29 to barely 30-foot seas this morning. And there we go, 31-foot seas midday today. Oops. And that was it as of right now. We'll have to look at the forecast to see what it does. But suffice it to say, it's got 20-foot seas extending almost from Japan to 170 west, almost filling the entire western North Pacific. So some sort of swell is expected to result from that. Then we go to the southern hemisphere. Again, a week ago, Sunday, February 2nd, we'll just put this in motion. I mean, one would not expect a whole lot. There was sort of, I would almost say this is a tropical system falling south, and it kind of went extratropical, but all the energy, we'll say, aimed at New Zealand and Antarctica, but nothing north up at really in our forecast area. We're into Friday now and Saturday, the 8th of February, and that was about it. Going over to the North Atlantic, things have been pretty active on this track. It seems like the Jetstream is pushing off the southeast U.S. coast and then pushing north up over Iceland sort of thing. If you see the activity, so here's first gale. This was last Sunday into early Monday with 39-foot seas, building to barely 40 feet there, targeting Ireland for sure. Then let's see, we had another system, same sort of track with 33-foot seas, building to 38 feet, if not 39. There's 40 and 44-foot seas. You get the idea. Again, really targeting Ireland. With the direction of the storm track, the swell pretty much tends to follow that direction. We're into Friday now and Saturday, the 8th of February, and a little bit of a calmer period. a little bit of a calmer pattern for the moment. Going to the South Atlantic, yes, there was a little gale, 30-foot seas on Monday, the 3rd of February, targeting South Africa. Swell has already come and gone there. You can see literally the swell front hitting South African coast on Wednesday, the 5th of February. And then I think there was maybe one more, maybe not, I was mistaken. So things settled down a bit after that. Oh, no, there it is. 29-foot seas, and that's as of right now. Good long ways away from South Africa. Probably no swell, at least immediately expected from that. And then finally, the Indian Ocean, starting on February 2nd. We had a little gale here of the South Indian Ocean, not doing a whole lot. The real thing to look at, though, notice these two tropical systems. And actually, that one system did build, here we go, 40-foot seas, targeting mainly Western and South Australia. But watch these two gales, and watch the first one here. It does what we see in the Pacific a lot in the fall, in that it tracks, again, we're in the southern hemisphere, it tracks from east to west, but the real magic is in the forecast coming up. So just hold that in your mind. All right, so what is to come? We're going to start by looking at Jetstream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales. When those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a dip in the jet to the south. We don't really see it, but we do see a little bit of low pressure right in this area, likely the start of the jet. But what's real noticeable here is the jet's consolidated with 1, 2, 3. That'd be 210 knot winds extending off Japan over the date line right there to a point north of Hawaii. This seems ripe for development of a trough. We put this into motion, then you see just a little bit at a time, the jets start falling south. What that helps do is create a counterclockwise flow aloft and also down the ocean surface. That's the hallmark of low pressure. Of course, low pressure, if it's strong enough, generates winds. Those winds get traction on the ocean surface, create seas. As the seas radiate away from the fetch area, the lesser period elements of those seas fade off, exposing longer period swell. Of course, swell, when it hits your beach, produces surf. So as we get into Monday, the 10th of February, jet looking very good. Trough starting to dig out. Right here, you see it building more on Tuesday. Also notice the jet extending, for the most part, consolidated, getting ready to push into Northern California, likely bringing weather with it, as you see literally a trough. It's more of a weather-producing trough pushing right over North and Central California. Looking back to the west on Wednesday morning, we'll get you right there. Nice little trough forecast over the date line. Pushing to the east, another trough building off the California coast on Thursday. You know the drill here, wind and weather and snow and rain probably for the Sierra, just looking at the jet stream level. Also some sort of a gale here north of Hawaii, likely producing surf. And that trough finally fading out on Saturday as winds rebuild on Sunday over the West Pacific in the date line, and a new trough starts digging out. Certainly looks like finally the storm machine is waking up after being asleep for the better part of a month. But the jet stream is just the foundation. It takes actual winds blowing on the ocean surface to produce seas and swell. So let's go look at the surface level pressure, surface level wind chart. Not unexpectedly, a broad gale with 35, 40, another pocket of 40 knot winds, filling the area from just off Japan to, we'll say a little bit east of the date line, a large area of west to northwest winds targeting Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast, but Hawaii being closer to the fetch likely will result in more swell there. That gale continues lifting north into Monday. Still 30-knot winds continue later into Monday. Then the whole system fades out. Another system starts forming up in the, let's call it the Gulf of Alaska. Residual fetch approaching the date line as we get into Wednesday. And here we go, a gale with 45, almost 50 knot winds targeting Hawaii. Another on Wednesday with 40 knot winds targeting the U.S. West Coast. Both of them marching, and yet a third developing off the Kuril Islands with 55 knot winds. This looks actually pretty nice. Too bad winds aren't 50 or 55 knots, but take what you can get. You can see the first gale pushing into California on Friday. The second gale continuing to circulate while moving east north of Hawaii on Friday. The other gale pretty much going north and getting landlocked over the Kuril Islands and Kamchatka. Still into Saturday, some residual energy is forecast in the Gulf of Alaska. And then two new systems, not particularly strong yet, 35, maybe 40 knot winds north of Hawaii on Sunday. We'll just take it right on out. Another one off the Kuril Islands. So it seems like a fairly active pattern is developing. So what are the effects of those winds on the ocean surface? Well, as you saw before, 31, almost 32-foot seas here are developing, but over a broad area northwest of Hawaii, that will likely produce swell. You can see the swell front pushing into Hawaii on Tuesday. Also, let's see, so what happens after that? Then here comes the next gale, 30-foot seas Wednesday off the U.S. California coast. Another gale here over the dateline, pretty small though, 24, maybe 25-foot seas, building to 28 feet as we get into Thursday. Another gale up here at 38-foot seas, long way from the U.S. West Coast, but certainly background swell for Hawaii would be expected to result. This gale, the one over the dateline, builds as we get into Saturday with 32-foot seas pushing off to the east, and yet another gale develops from the remnants of the previous gale over the Kuril Islands on theoretically Saturday night into Sunday, the 16th of February, with 34-foot seas. That's still building to 36-foot seas on the dateline on Sunday, and there we go, 180 hours out. Swell, certainly. I mean, Hawaii is just sitting in the perfect place to get all kinds of swell. U.S. West Coast, maybe lesser direct swell, but certainly more moderated background swell, if not something bigger. Here is the period chart all the way. So the reds here, that'd be like 17-second period energy. Does not account for size. So actually the swell is incredibly small, but this is the first of three, 1, 2, 3 of those for initial dateline swells. This is the developing swell from the broad gale west of the dateline. We'll put this into motion. You pick your spot, but you can see Hawaii picking up energy. You see 1, 2, second one coming into California, third one out here, passing Hawaii, fourth one hitting Hawaii on Tuesday night into Wednesday, and then all that. Also, right in here, there's kind of a hole there. That's a new gale developing there, sort of obscuring stuff. But you can see two swells hitting California on Friday. Things probably going to be pretty jumbled. And yet more swell developing hitting Hawaii on Saturday. And yet more behind that. You get the general idea. A pretty prolific pattern is in effect. Going down to the South Pacific, we'll put this in motion. There's a gale forecast, but it's all pushing south towards Antarctica. Nothing expected from that, but there is this other little gale forecast southeast of New Zealand on Thursday, the 13th of February, the day before Valentine's Day, with 26-foot seas. Does it get 27 feet? That's about it. Yeah, theoretically, and pushing well to the northeast, if not almost due north. It is entirely possible. Hawaii's at about 158 west. Entirely possible that some small southern hemiswell could reach into the south shore of the Hawaiian Islands, and of course Tahiti. And then moving on beyond that, that system fades out. Whoops, and we're into Sunday. Oh, there we go. And that's about it. So for February, possible small southern hemiswell, take what you can get. Going to the North Atlantic, one would expect a continuation of the same pattern with the jet pushing off to the northeast. And here we go on Monday, the 10th of February. Another gale with 36-foot seas, building to 38 feet, building to 40 feet. And that was about it. That would certainly produce swell targeting probably this whole area right in there, maybe even down into Morocco. And you can literally see the swell front. There you go. Another little one builds behind that with 33-foot seas. And look at this. It kind of rotates around itself, retrogrades, and then redevelops falling southeast. So that would set up a good long run of moderate swell for, again, the same targets here. Let's see what happens after that. That fades out, and then, oh, here we go. That's right. The models are now teasing at a significant storm forming with 53-foot seas a week out on Sunday the 16th on February. Don't believe that yet, but we'll see. That looks pretty good, targeting, again, this entire area right in here. And then down to the South Atlantic, we have our little gale here off of South America with 29-foot seas. That fades out, not doing a whole lot. But here comes another system with 34-foot seas. Yep, hanging right about in that range, pushing off to the east. Now notice this one still 29-foot seas, relatively close. I'd say that's within 600 miles of South Africa. That definitely will create swell pushing up into all the usual targets and then pushing off into the Indian Ocean while the greater South Atlantic, for the most part, goes to sleep. Here we are 180 hours out. And yes, a quiet pattern sets up beyond. Now to the Indian Ocean, and now to this tropical system we were talking about earlier. The interesting part, look at this, it starts falling south, hard south. The one behind it also starts falling south. And then look at this, it goes extratropical. We see this in the Pacific in the fall a lot and builds. And look at this, a gale with 33-foot seas building to 38 feet, certainly producing swell targeting Mentawais, Bali, Western Australia, South Australia. So extratropical storms are always great. They have that tropical component, a little bit of push of extra energy. And if this happens, that could make for some nice, moderate, long period swell into the areas we talked about before. After that, things settle down. The local wind forecast for California, well, right here, Southern California, Central California, Northern California, San Francisco there. The Hawaiian Islands here on Sunday, trades more or less east-southeast, 10 knots, but kind of a wind machine off of the California coast. 20-knot northwest winds. It was not blowing that hard near shore, but there definitely was a warble component to the swell. As we get into Monday, the same sort of pattern, high pressure driving a pressure gradient, the isobars tightening as they approach land, producing that northwest wind and wind swell. Trades southeast 10-15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Tuesday, the same sort of pattern sets up, but by later, notice the wind pattern starts fading, low pressure builds off the coast, trades light 10 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Wednesday, same sort of a deal, if not maybe northeast winds, for San Francisco and points northward. But look at this, west winds into Southern California and Baja. New gale develops, trades light for the Hawaiian Islands. Thursday, here comes our next low, slamming right into the coast in sync with the longer period energy swell hitting California. 40-knot winds, that's generating 30-plus foot seas. So raw, probably jumbled swell for the coast. South winds for Central California northward. Trades, I guess, very light wind regime, southeast to south, 5 to 10 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Friday, the low starts moving inland, but still west winds 20 knots and just kind of a mess relative for North and Central California. Light winds, some sort of southeast variable for the Hawaiian Islands. Saturday, light wind regime for California, light east-southeast winds for the Hawaiian Islands. And Sunday, again, a light wind regime for California. New low building, maybe a little bit more south winds over the Hawaiian Islands, but nothing particularly too strong, at least not yet. The all-important precipitation forecast for California. Here we go on Sunday, of course, clear, high pressure in control. That pattern holds into about Wednesday morning when low pressure and rain starts building in from Point Conception northward, snow developing for the Sierra. By Wednesday morning, that rain pushes the whole way down into San Diego. Pretty good snow for the Sierra on Wednesday. Rain fading out in Southern California on Wednesday night. But then the main event sets up after that with rain building on Thursday for all of North California, pushing into Central California mid-morning and approaching, if not starting to move into Southern California. Snow for the Sierra, building strong Thursday evening into Thursday night. Rain the whole way down to the Mexico-California border, and then south of there on Friday, fading out, snow fading out later on Friday for the Sierra. And then after that, I think there is one, rain still developing, but limited to Cape Mendocino. And that is the end of the 1 week forecast. The snow forecast dashboard we'll start at Palisades Tahoe, formerly Squaw Valley. You see a little bit of snow here on the 12th. That'd be like Tuesday, but really it's Wednesday. But really the main event is Thursday into Friday morning. Total accumulations of about 56 inches. And then going down to Kirkwood, pretty much the same thing with maybe 58 inches, 57 inches. And then further down the Sierra into Mammoth, that'd be more like the Central Sierra, total accumulations of about 49 inches. Then we go look at the snow levels now. The last series of storms that pushed through, the snow levels were incredibly high. I think there was a little bit of snow at Palisades Tahoe, down at the base, but most of it was above 8,000 feet. So this is the temperature or the freeze level forecast, again, for Palisades Tahoe. The base at 6,200 feet, summit up at about 9,000 feet. You can see where the snow is. That's all right in here. So the blue is 28 degrees. The white is 28 to 32 degrees. The gray would be sleet, like 32 degrees to about 35 degrees. And the red would be above 35 degrees. You need 32 degrees minimum for decent snow. But you see where all this is happening. Yeah, maybe it's 33 degrees or 34 degrees at the base for a couple of hours here. But for the most part during this event, it looks like the snow level is going to be at maybe 5,200 feet. So that's pretty good. But after that, you see things warm up a bit and then really warm up. Of course, I don't believe them all. This is out 10 days, so don't believe that. But at least for the immediate future, things looking pretty good. Rainfall to date. Well, we had a pretty good drenching. I got the rain gauge out in the backyard here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Just eyeballing, I'd say we're about 50% of normal. But looking here, so this is full season. These numbers, you see them 168%. Yeah, that's all that's as of right now, percent of normal. But for the full season, that's what really matters. And we're at, still in the 80 to 90% range up here in Northern California, Eureka, Shasta, Red Bluff, that area. Then you get down into, Sacramento, Blue Canyon, all this, I would say, is roughly the San Francisco area, and you're in the roughly 60%. My rain gauge said 50, so these sites are saying a little bit better. But then once you get south of Oakland, the numbers really drop off precipitously, 35, 39%. Then let's go Central California. For a full year, there's that same sort of 35, then dropping to the 25% range. Then you get into Southern California. I mean, you all that live there know the drill. 15% of average, and then you go even south to Oceanside and San Diego. You're at 5% of normal for the entire year. So the hope is that this coming weather system will at least bump these numbers up a little bit. So what is the surf forecast for a couple of select locations? We'll start up at Columbia River there, off the Columbia River. Surf heights in the 2-foot range for Monday, building to 4.5 feet, continuing in the 4 to 5 to maybe 6-foot range on Thursday, then go up as the local storm approaches the coast, 10 to 12-foot surf, then fading down. I'm looking over the microphone here on Saturday and Sunday, but still surf in the 4 to 5-foot range. Winds offshore, pretty strong the whole way into Friday, and then even offshore into Saturday and Sunday. Swell heights for Monday, 3 feet at 13 to 14 seconds. Another pulse of swell comes in 2 to 2.5 feet to 3 feet at 14 to 15 seconds. Then the bigger local swell, 8 feet at 14 to 15 seconds, fading as we get into the weekend in the 4 to 5 foot range at sort of a mix between 8 and 13 seconds. For Northern California, Ocean Beach, San Francisco area, surf heights in the 5-foot range. Monday, fading to about 3.5 feet. Coming back up again on Wednesday into the 5-foot range. And then they kind of really jump up 25 feet. Will it be rideable? No, it's probably going to be a blown out mess. You can see winds here out of the southwest at 26 knots as that swell hits. Fading, but by the time the chop fades out, the swell probably will be gone too. We can look here at swell heights, 5 to 6 feet at 9 seconds. Yeah, wind swell on Monday. Then the next little pulse of the second of 3 background swells, 2.5 feet at 13 seconds. Another one shows up here at 4 feet at 15 seconds. Then finally the big one, 16 feet at 15 seconds, dropping off from there. We go down to San Diego, surf heights, swell heights, 2 feet roughly, or surf heights, 2 feet to 2.5 feet as we get into Thursday. And then when that big storm hits the coast, at least Southern California will be a bit more protected. Surf heights, theoretically, maybe 8 feet. That's probably a bit of a reach, but you get the general idea. We'll go look at swell heights, 3 feet at 7, 8 seconds. I mean, that's just all just wind swell, little bits of ground swell intermixed in. All those small dateline storms just going to be totally shadowed by the Channel Islands. Then finally, when the real swell arrives, 5 feet at 16 seconds on early Saturday, and then slowly fading down through Sunday. Oahu, much better positioned to catch all this swell and a lot closer to the action. Surf heights on Monday in the 7-foot range, let's say, building to 10 foot on Tuesday, continuing 10 foot Wednesday, fading on Thursday into the 5 to 6 foot range, and then more local swell or bigger swell starts building as we get into Friday, up to 15 feet on Saturday, and then fading on Sunday. Trades, well, you sort of see this sort of mixed bag of southerly winds. I mean, I think for the most part, if it's light enough, the North Shore does pretty well, at least in select locations. Swell heights, 5 feet on Monday at 14 to 15 seconds, building to 6.5 feet at 14 to 15 seconds on Tuesday, 6.5 feet at 15 seconds on Wednesday, fading down to 4 feet at 13 seconds. But then as you get into Saturday, up to 10 feet at 15 seconds. And this swell will eventually be radiating towards the U.S. West Coast as well. We go over to Ireland real quick, just because they're going to be so close to where all the swell is. Yeah, so 7 feet on Monday, fading out. But then you get into Thursday, 11-foot surf, fading down, and then 8 feet on Friday. But you see winds. What do we have? Offshore at 15 knots, southeast at 27 knots, all sort of southeast, nuking offshore winds the entire time. Well, if you got a good protected break, that would be a good deal. Swell heights, 5 feet at 14 seconds on Monday into Tuesday, 7 feet at 16 seconds on Thursday, 5.5 feet at 15 seconds on Friday, then slowly fading from there. And then also, we cannot leave out Nazaré, central Portugal. Surf heights generally small, but then building to 10 to 11 feet. And this is not including any of the bathymetry, just 10-foot surf on Thursday, building to 15 feet on later Friday, Saturday, and pretty much holding that way the whole way through the weekend. Swell heights for the bigger, 7 feet at 15 seconds, 10 feet at 14 to 15 seconds. 10 plus feet at 13 seconds. You get the general idea. A copious amount of swell. Let's do a real quick look at what's going on long term. We're going to examine the 2 major weather oscillations that affect our weather over the long term, the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation. We're going to start by looking for the active phase of the MJO. I'm not going to go into all the details tonight because I'm trying to save what little of my voice I have left. But suffice it to say, there are 2 phases to the MJO, the active phase and the inactive phase. The active phase is our friend. It is a low pressure, effectively a low pressure system. The 2 phases of the MJO move from west to east on the equator. The active phase, being a low pressure system, takes warm, moist air in the ocean surface, lifts it aloft, that gets caught by the jet stream and energizes the jet stream, digs out troughs, and helps support storm formation. The inactive phase is a high-pressure system, and it basically does the exact opposite. It steals energy from the jet stream. So the active phase of the MJO, because it's a low-pressure system, dampens trade winds. Trade winds are generated by high pressure in wherever ocean you're looking at. And if you add low pressure to the mix, it reduces the amount of high pressure there is there. and that in turn reduces trade winds. So we're looking for the active phase of the MJO. This is data from the TAO buoy rays. Buoys strung across the equator. That is the equator there. This is the East Pacific here, West Pacific here. That's New Guinea. That is the dateline. These are the actual wind speeds. You see there are data outages, but winds, the longer the arrow, the stronger the wind. So pretty strong out of the east in the East Pacific, a little bit stronger over the Central Pacific, a little bit stronger over the West Pacific. But it's not the actual wind speeds that matter. It's the anomalies, difference from normal for this time of year. In the East Pacific, you see the arrows are just kind of meandering wherever they are, suggesting trades at best just normal, maybe a little bit weaker than normal. That would support building warm water in this area. But as you get to the Central Pacific, trades start picking up. That creates upwelling and churn in the ocean, cooling temperatures down. And then when you get into the far West Pacific, trades are a bit stronger, not super strong, but pretty strong, creating more upwelling. So this chart depicts the east and west component of the winds, the purples and oranges and blues, stronger than normal trades, the reds and yellows and oranges, weaker than normal trades. So one could say this is the inactive phase of the MJO, and this is the active phase. But this is for the whole planet. We'll see. We'll just put this down here. There you go. Okay, the 180, that is the dateline. Far West Pacific starts at 125 east, so roughly there. So you see over the dateline since January, strong east anomalies in control. The west anomalies trying to encroach into the West Pacific as we get into February. Forecast to hold on and off for till about February 14th. This is probably the active phase of the MJO with its westerly anomalies trying to encroach into the Central Pacific, but also just getting clobbered by a La Nina-based state. And La Nina is like a long-running inactive phase of the MJO. That's why the east anomalies are just like locked right here. And you see westerly anomalies slowly retreating as we get later into February. And we also see easterly anomalies continuing to fill the Kelvin wave generation area, but getting weaker as we get into late February. Digging deeper into the MJO, we're looking at outgoing long wave radiation forecast projections. So the blues are areas wetter than normal or more clouds, if you will, which roughly could be associated with the active phase of the MJO. The orange is drier than normal air, downward falling high pressure, the inactive phase of the MJO. Australia, New Guinea, South America, Central America, Hawaii, EQ, that's the equator. This pattern moves from west to east. So the active phase of the MJO over the Kelvin wave generation area, West Pacific. And according to the statistic model, that's to hold for the next 5, 10, 15 days while the inactive phase of the MJO builds over the maritime continent. That's a statistic model. The dynamic model predicts basically the same thing, just maybe a little bit weaker. There's the statistic, there's the dynamic model, but just a little bit weaker. But basically active MJO in control for the next 2 weeks. This would be our sweet spot for feeding energy into the jet, supporting gale development and storms, just like what we're seeing on all the models, and supporting rainfall moving into California. Phase diagrams for the same two models, statistic model, dynamic model here. How do you read this? Well, the MJ moves from east to west, from the Indian Ocean to the maritime continent, to the West Pacific, to the East Pacific, over the Atlantic, over Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. The dot is where the active phase is right now. So just starting to move into the West Pacific. The further the dot is away from the circle, the stronger it is. So that's kind of a modest strength. 3 different forecast members suggested 2 weeks from now, it moving over the Atlantic and anywhere from very weak to, we'll say, modest to almost moderate strong. The dynamic model pretty much saying the same thing, but actually putting the active phase of the MJO over Africa 2 weeks from now and moderately weak. So again, your window is somewhere here in the next 2 weeks for storm development in the Pacific as it moves from the far West Pacific over the East Pacific and eventually under California. Another forecast, this goes out a month. Again, east-west component of the winds, the blues, you just see it, the dateline right there. Easterly anomalies just locking down the entire Central Pacific, typical of La Nina. This has the MJO, the dotted contours, the black lines, inactive phase, the solid contour, the active phase. You notice during when you have an active phase, this was back in November. West anomalies built, pushed the whole way to about midway into the Kelvin wave or into the West Pacific generation area. Yeah, and then shut down. This past month, we've been under the inactive phase of the MJO, no westerly anomalies. But then sure enough, here comes the active phase. Not a big one, but westerly anomalies start building, and all of a sudden our storm machine wakes up. So this is pretty typical. The forecast looking forward as you get into late February, here comes the inactive phase, strong easterly anomalies, and likely the storm machine will shut down. And finally, the CFS model going out 3 months, past performance down here, the forecast here, the date line running right up the middle, the blues, easterly anomalies. What you should notice here is the date line right here, blues moving forward. Then all of a sudden, boom, come about late March, westerly anomalies take over. This would certainly seem to be not a big sweet spot for storm development because you're into March and April, but certainly smells like the demise of La Nina. Let's overlay the MJO, just see if we can see what's going on. All right, so here's our current active phase of the MJO, pretty thin and weak looking. Westerly anomalies not really doing a lot. You see a inactive phase forecast setting up, we'll say maybe around the 20th of February, into the 13th of March, with east anomalies over the date line in the Kelvin wave generation area, getting their last good push. And then a forecast active phase of the MJO is to set up about mid-March, producing westerly anomalies, not into the Kelvin wave generation area, but the whole way across the Pacific, and then forecast holding beyond the end of the model run. Again, looking like the beginnings of the end of La Nina. In fact, let's overlay the low-pass filter. Here we go. This is the La Nina El Nino indicator. Low-pressure bias, the solid contour over the maritime continent, where it's been all season and even last summer. This is, if this were over the date line, that would be El Nino, but no, we have high pressure, the dotted contour, over the date line right now with 1, 2, 3 contours. That's supposed to hold into about the beginning of April, but notice as soon as the west anomalies start, boom, this thing, the third contour fades, the second contour fades. Also notice westerly, the low pressure bias starting to move halfway into the Kelvin wave generation area, the West Pacific, and the contours for the high pressure bias start pushing east and out, the demise of La Nina, theoretically. Subsurface temperature anomalies, West Pacific here, East Pacific here, oranges and yellows, warmer than normal waters, the blues, colder than normal waters. What's interesting is this La Nina, you notice there's a lot of warmer and a building area of warm water as we go through time here in the West Pacific, while in the East Pacific we have, yes, a building area of cold water. This is your La Nina signal. This is perhaps the demise of La Nina building in the West. This is sea level anomalies for February 2nd. That is the equator there, the date line there. So this would be Chile, Peru, the Galapagos, Ecuador, Central America, New Guinea out here. These are not temperatures. These are the height of the ocean. But if you take out the waves, the wind waves, the tides, if the sphere of the ocean is lower than normal, that infers colder than water normal at depth, colder than water, normal water contracts, it'll create a divot on the ocean surface. So you can see here from Ecuador the whole way out to the date line, below normal sea heights. And in fact, these have built in the past week out in this area, suggesting colder water appears to be building. We kind of saw it on the previous chart too. And this is a different way to put the time component in it. Upper ocean heat anomalies from the far West Pacific to the far East Pacific over time. So back in March, this was March of 2024, the beginning of our La Nina with cold water building, stronger than normal trades here in the East Pacific. But notice if you draw a line through this over time, it moved more and more to the west, focused not over the date line, but pretty much south of Hawaii. This is kind of a classic Madoki La Nina, they call it, where normally La Nina is right up against the East Coast, but it's not. It's out in the Central Pacific. Also notice the building warm waters here in the West Pacific. That is a good sign. Well, why does all this matter? It is the ocean surface temperatures that drive the weather patterns above it, and specifically on the equator right here. Colder than normal temperatures dampen evaporation, and if you have less evaporation, that builds high pressure over that area. Notice where this is, right near the date line. No big surprise, the high pressure bias is sitting right there. It's being fed by colder than normal temperatures that are being fed by stronger than normal trade winds in this area. Now, last week we had a little bit of cooling here off of Ecuador, but that has since dampened off, and we're getting back to a slightly warming pattern, or at least neutral, here in the East Pacific. Again, if you were in real La Nina, your cold water would be right here, but instead it's out in the middle of the Pacific, and we have warm water in the West Pacific. Madoki, La Nina. It's a La Nina sort of, but not really. The trend for the past 7 days, as expected, warming here in the East Pacific. That doesn't mean it's warm, but it certainly isn't cold. Our cooling would be here, but according to this chart, really, it's not getting any colder. It's as cold as it's going to get. And seeing how we're almost in the middle of February, I'd say this La Nina has done all the damage it's going to do. It's not going to build anymore. Typically, they peak out like between Thanksgiving and even before Christmas. This one probably is peaking right about now. Still not particularly impressive. The sea surface temperature trend in the Nino 1.2 area, the area right there by the Galapagos and off Ecuador, today, temperatures 116 thousandths of a degree below normal, effectively dead neutral. You did see that pulse of cooling back there at the end of January, but we've been building ever since. And just looking at all this, temperatures for the most part have been hanging around a half a degree below normal. But this is not the official El Nino monitoring area. The Nino 3.4 area is, now this isn't the official numbers, it just gives you kind of a trend, but you see temperatures back in November were half a degree below normal, falling to 1.5 degrees, and then in January again 1.5 degrees. Today at 1 degree. So anywhere from half a degree below to half a degree above is neutral. Half a degree below to 1 degree is weak La Nina. 1 degree to 1.5 degree is moderate La Nina, but it's got to be for 5 consecutive months. So this is looking very much like a weak to maybe weakly moderate La Nina. Here's the official record right in here is the Nino 3.4 region. This is actual numbers week by week by week. Again, half a degree is weak La Nina, so 0.3 below, 0.6, 0.8, 1.1, almost moving into moderate category, then back to 0.7, 0.7, 0.6, 0.9 today, minus 0.8. All this suggests weak La Nina per the official record. But ultimately, it is the effect of the water on the atmosphere that really helped define what La Nina is. So we look at the difference in surface pressure between Tahiti and Darwin. Tahiti in the Pacific, Darwin roughly in the Indian Ocean. When pressure is lower in the Pacific at Tahiti, the index goes negative. Well, today it's positive 28.1, so pretty solidly positive. Where have we been for the past month? Well, we went from negative to positive, suggesting a building La Nina type pattern. 30-day average takes some of the noise out of the numbers, but it's saying the same thing, 10.48. And where were we a month ago? Yeah, pretty much neutral. This suggests some sort of a weekly building La Nina. The 90-day average, about the same, 9.53 today. And where has it been? Well, we were at 6 or 5.5, something like that. So building La Nina, but not particularly strong. Let's look at this on a graph. Here's the 30-day running average SOI graphed out. Here is the high end of the normal. Here's the low end. The actual values starting in July of 2023. We were sort of weekly in El Nino. A big hype about a super El Nino, but it never materialized. Then as we got deeper into 2024, it just went completely neutral. You could draw a trend line through this, going steadily upward to where we are today, probably right at the threshold of La Nina territory. And then finally, the PDO, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation Index, if you will. I'm not going to get into all of it, but there are periods of warmer temperatures, periods of cooler temperatures, and then warmer again. The last of our last warm phase was 98, or really March of 98. And this basically would be like a 15 or 20 year, well, from 75 to 98, a 22-year running like biased towards El Nino since then. You can see we've been consistently cold. Yes, there are some peaks here and there, but this is what I want to show you. All right, so here we go. So the latest burst of cold water or high pressure, it's really an indicator of high pressure over the Pacific from October 2019. You see it building. But what's real interesting here is now 1, 2, 3 months of rising temperatures or pressure, or whatever you want to call it, now at minus, let's see if I can get that, minus 1.32. Last time we had that was 1.33 in February 2024. Again in January 2023. You get the general idea. Now, does this mean that we're in a trend where maybe we're starting to warm? 1 or 2 months of data or really is not a trend. For this, you need probably 6 or 7. But again, we're watching it. We've been keep watching. In fact, one of our readers pointed this out, or one of our viewers pointed this out to me from just last week. And so this is something that we will continue to be watching and perhaps is pushing us in the right direction. So for right now, the active phase of the MJO is in control, and not surprisingly, the storm track has woken up. A series of gales are forecast, the Jetstream looking strong, all this energy pushing towards the U.S. West Coast and Hawaii, meaning larger surf and potential for snow and rain into the mountains. Seen at that we're only at 50 or 60% in the San Francisco Bay Area and 5 or 6% or less in Southern California. Every drop counts. Of course, really, the snow in the Sierra, that's like 50 or 60% of our available water supply for the coming years. So we'll take that. That's probably the most important. And I'm not even talking from a skiing or snowboarding perspective, though I'll take that as well. The resorts have been hurting up till just recently. More is better. Looking out further beyond, it looks as if La Nina might be starting to fade and give out a little bit. Not surprising given that it's February, but certainly as we get into April, it might collapse. And I didn't even show the long-term forecast, but I'll just suffice it to say, as we get into this summer, the forecast suggests La Nina gone, and we're just back in a neutral pattern. Neutral going into this fall too. Neutral is certainly better than La Nina, but not nearly as good as moving into El Nino. So we'll just have to keep our eyes on that. But all in all, the trend is moving in the right direction for us, both on the rain front and on the swell front for right now. All right, so that's the video for this week. If you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, hit the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. Get yourself signed up. If you have a comment or question, I know there's a lot of detail here. And please don't harass me too bad about my voice. I'm trying. I'm doing the best I can. And other than that, if you'd like to make a small contribution to the cause, you may hit the super thanks button down below, the heart with a $sign in it. With that, we are done for this week. We will do it again next week. Same time, same channel. Thanks for watching.